America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much.
2016, year of the snake. It's time for a change in the White House, y'all. Bring it. If you want a real deal, then you gotta get a real leader. Want a real leader, then we need a real man. Build a wall, build a law, them terrorists. America needs a man that can. If you wanna feel safe in your own backyard, one choice. You gotta play your trump card. I say Trump, you say hell high. When I say Trump, you say hell high. Make America great again. Make America great again. Make America great again. Time to make America great again. Hillary on freaking McClinton, Socialist Sanders, that friggin' Flanders, Army Rangers and the Navy SEALs, all stand strong with the art of the deal. If you like your rice and you love your blood, it's one choice, the only one. When I say Trump, you say hell high. When I say Trump, you say hell high. Make America great again. Make America great again. Make America great again. Time to make America great. Okay. Are you a real patriot of the USA?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Do you like having the right to bear arms? Protect your family? What about the ability to work a job? Have jobs available to workers? You know who we need? His name starts with a D and ends with a Trump. Come on, Trump. When I say Trump, you say hell high. Make America great again. Make America great again. Make America great again. Time to make America great
Woo! Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. You are watching the one and only Trump Talk US live in DC with Suzzanne Monk. I'm Suzzanne Monk. We're actually in Nutcracker Studio right now. We're in the Nutcracker Studio.
The FDA will not.
Welcome everyone here to news now from Fox.
No videos overwhelming. Hey, so we are actually live. I'm seeing if this is even a thing because I'm trying to use StreamYard to go live like I usually do, but for some reason Facebook will not let me go live on my page. Except am I actually doing it live on my page? Like it's right here. That's kind of stupid. Yeah, you can see me go live. So here, in fact, we're going to share this screen for a second just so you guys can see that they just do everything they can. See, I'm clearly doing live. You see me. There I am. Here I am. But they're telling me I can't, and I can't use the platform. So Who knows? Who knows if that's working? Who knows what that's doing? Here on my alt anyway, and we have hopefully going to have Tim Rush in a minute. Been trying to get him in actually on StreamYard here, so we're gonna just put you back up here, and while we're here in Nutcracker Studio, we'll just kind of give you a little bit of we'll do a little work. We'll do a little work while we wait and see. And here's Tim, which is great. Oh, Tim, it's working. Fantastic. I love when it's working. Tim's put his headphones on. Let's bring Tim on in. Hey, Tim, how are you? He's a little staticky.
I'm going to take these off.
Okay, great. How's that? Yeah, now you're silent. Let's give.
There we go.
That's there we go. There we go. Yay! Everybody, Tim, I have you here today in Nutcracker Studio. We're in the Nutcracker Studio today. I've got so many nutcrackers. I got to keep working and working, but it was a perfect timing for me because I know you've got lots of information to share. And usually when you come on to the show, it's just me nodding and you talking, but now we can see you.
Exactly.
So what I'm going to do I'm going to pop you up on screen here. Let's see if I can give you a different perspective. Now I want the other way. I want Tim that way. How do I make Tim big? I want Tim to be big. Well, let's just see. Well, there's Tim altogether. Wonderful.
Okay, good.
Wonderful.
Great.
So I'm going to work on some nutcrackers, and I know you guys have been doing some groundbreaking stuff. Bill Benny and all of you folks over there at the LaRouche PAC have been doing some groundbreaking stuff about this election fraud, and it's a lot of stuff. There's a lot going on, and I'm excited to actually hear what you guys have been digging up, because you guys are great at always getting some of the best dirt and dish on the deep state ever. So I'm ready for the lesson today, Tim.
Well, let me do two things at two levels. One is I just wanted to read a statement that we've been circulating at all the rallies at the state houses in D.C. on November 14th, getting it out to activists around the country and so forth, because it kind of gives a framework that I think is very useful. And then exactly what you've just mentioned, there are elements coming in from people like Bill Binney, Colonel Richard Black, who was head of the legal department at the Pentagon, and then a very distinguished state senator in Virginia. He spoke at an event we had this last Saturday. It was an international investigative commission into for truth in elections.
Right.
And we put an international spotlight that had people from Mexico, Argentina, other places around the world participating in absorbing the powerful testimony, particularly from, in that case, some of the Pennsylvania people leading a fight there, sure. And reflecting out into their own countries and then back into these fighters in the U.S. that we're not alone.
Right.
This is an international battle. There's been vote fraud all over the place. Yes. It's now dished out to us, as you just said. But in Mexico, 14 years ago, the current president was defrauded. I think that has something to do with why that president, López Obrador, has refused to acknowledge Biden's victory and has kept, it's very notable that he had quite respectful, even warm relations with Trump.
Right.
And for a leftist president in Mexico, that's saying a lot.
Right.
So let me just read this statement while you're working on your.
We're good. It's gonna be. I'll be able to. Let me see if I can get us back. There we go. See, this is kind of a fun way. Mostly people don't get to see the Nutcracker magic, and this way I can just give them little peeks at the magic, and then educate them at the same time. It's kind of a two for Tim. Actually, a three for because I get work done. So
that's great.
It works out very well.
Please do. So I'm just going to read this statement. It's short. It'll take about 3 minutes. Then you can ask me any questions you want, but then we can go into some of these areas. I have a sort of a couple of things, particularly that I think will be new to people. Very, very important to get a sense of how to grab strategic flanks. You can't just be locked down in the trenches of counting the votes. You've got to be above it, and it will reflect back in an ability to break through on these at these lower levels. What we put out was something we called a Declaration of Independence from the new British Empire. Donald Trump won the election. Don't let them steal it. And we cite the words from the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the fetters by which an oligarchy has bound them, and to assume their inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, a respect for the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to this action. And so our subhead is Our War of Independence is Not Finished.
Right.
The British Empire has been at war with Donald Trump long before he became president, and now seeks to overturn his re-election and impose their fascist coup upon the American people. It is the same British Empire which has been at war with LaRouche PAC's late founder, Lyndon LaRouche, who long ago declared the only real enemy of this nation, of all sovereign nations, to be the British imperial system. In true American fashion, LaRouche devoted his life to providing all nations with the political ideas to crush this global financier elite, and was hence subjected to the same political and legal assault that has now been thrown against President Trump.
That's correct.
The oligarchy of the City of London's banks and the extended global British financier empire are now seeking to impose their thoroughly plagiarized candidate, Joe Biden, a hollow man or even a hologram, as president of the United States. LaRouche, by the way, called Biden a hologram way back in 1989 when we helped derail his efforts to run for president back then.
Right.
The Biden regency will be nothing less than the total destruction of our national productive culture and constitutional system. It would immediately implement the radical Green New Deal, which is only an excuse for the global central banks to impose their great reset, ultimately seizing complete control of our currency, credit, and all future investments. It intends to use this control to fundamentally reverse the technological advance of humanity, sacrificing the human population to, quote unquote, saving the planet. This is the ultimate act in a long train of abuses, which people remember from the Declaration of Independence, which include destroying America's industry, attacking its technological progress, maligning its scientific optimism, ending its manned missions in space, controlling its banks, undermining its currency and credit in the world, and intends to destroy the American spirit. Our President Trump, almost alone among leaders of nations, has rejected this dictatorship of central banks over sovereign governments, and has removed the United States from the Paris Climate Accord, which was the evil spawn of those such as Prince Charles, the former Bank of England head Mark Carney, billionaire Sir Michael Bloomberg, among other Malthusian nuts. President Trump has further sought to extricate us from endless wars, to establish working relations with the other superpowers, and to reestablish a period of peace and development globally, despite efforts of the multitude of war hawks in his own administration.
Yes.
Were the Biden team to seize power, we will face an immediate escalation towards world war. The nations of the world are looking at the American people. It is now time to seize our rights. With President Trump in office and with Lyndon LaRouche's policies in your hands, we will take back the right to regulate our banks, to have national banks and productive credit, and build our nation for future generations. We will advance our missions of space exploration and fulfill the development of commercial fusion energy to regain our industrial might. We will negotiate with all nations for a new international credit system which eliminates the control by London and Wall Street's financial oligarchy. And we will bring industrialization to all underdeveloped regions, including those here in our country, in the Americas, and in Africa. It is time to reclaim the true United States. The world is watching. So that's the statement that we've been getting out. There have been others alongside it, particularly getting at more of what this uh, global central bank lunge to just grab control through a digital currency, through what they call green finance. They are trying to set up a supranational dictatorship with the specific objective of shutting down any energy intense economic activity anywhere in the globe, and only having things that operate under inefficient wind and solar and so forth. Basically, downshift the entire productive character of the world economy to a point where many billions of people will essentially be pushed out of economic sustenance. In other words, we're looking at mass death, a real genocide, or malfeasance onslaught. So the two things I was going to mention in terms of, I think, very important for people today, because things are moving very fast, and you can't come in with sort of a fixed idea from one day to the next, or even 1 hour to the next. You got to be very flexible. You got to be very determined, but you've got to be thinking. And two things is, one, that it's an example from the American Revolution, which is that Washington lost a lot of battles.
Of course.
And yet he recognized that preserving his army on the field always carried the ability to seize moments that the enemy made mistakes, when he could seize certain strategic factors. Remember, the French were crucial on that. So you had to sort of bring other strategic factors into focus. But he recognized that he had to keep that army on the field of battle.
Right.
And I think that's really, really important for people, not to be keying their emotions to the outcome of any particular hearing, court case, this state, that state. People really have to have a sense, we're in here for the long haul.
Right.
And that also maximizes our ability in the short term. But we can't work we can't have a certain narrowed vision that the media obviously enforces and tries to augment people's sense of indignation by the constant repetition, baseless claims, no evidence, all this stuff that just gets you.
And they're, of course, they're reporting on each minutia of every claim. When, of course, as you know, just because the state court rules one way doesn't in any way mean a case is over. We are now going up. Of course, that means the appeals process begins, and it goes up. It's been maddening how myopic people have been in their focus, and I think it's because of all of this panic and fear. Ultimately, the media has been pressing this false narrative. I've been trying to calm people down, Tim. I've been trying to say to people, let's see if we can pop it. Oh, here, we'll do this one.
There we go.
I've been trying to say to people, just as you said, we're in for the long haul. There's a bigger picture here to look at. We're not just getting rid of election fraud from this election. We're actually addressing election fraud in total, something that's been going on decades and decades of time. And additionally, some of these steps are going to take different parts of the process. For example, some of the lawsuits that are being put out, Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, etc., they required the results to be actually certified before some of those citizen lawsuits can begin. So there's a lot of I think you were absolutely right that we have to be adaptive, but we have to be adaptive even in how we're listening and how we're understanding and observing the situation, so that we can kind of, rather than get emotionally connected to any one moment, as you said, be confident in the big picture. So give us a sense, Tim, of the big picture. Where do you see this going in the next, it could be month, 2 months, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 weeks. Where do you see this going as we move closer into January?
Well, there are two factors there, and to take it from directly what you just asked, I think we've got to be thinking about flanks that weaken or at least expose the apparatus that's behind the vote fraud. Because as we're looking at something that you could take back 4.5 years to the whole assault on the president around Russiagate and everything else, what they did to Flynn. You could take it back to 9/11 in terms of using the 9/11 as an excuse to put a surveillance state in place.
Sure.
And the merging over the last 19 years of the Silicon Valley, social media giants and so forth with the military industrial complex means that we're really, this surveillance state and the censorship coming out from Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. It's all one package. Now, a couple of things that could be thrown in here, and the president has said he wants to do it. When he cashiered Esper at the Pentagon, put in a very capable team at the top there around Christopher Miller and others. These are experienced people who are of a Michael Flynn character, and they are determined to help the president get us out of Afghanistan, get us out of these endless wars and so forth. They can release documents, and I certainly hope that they will, because some of them come under the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, etc. You can cashier Haspel. You can cashier Christopher Wray at the FBI. Even if it's, once you get them out, you can bring out all those documents they're sitting on that really explode a lot of things that the coup crowd have been so intent on keeping undercover. That destabilizes the apparatus that's also promoting and trying to protect their vote fraud. Similarly, if the president were to pardon Julian Assange and Snowden, Snowden knows a certain interface in terms of the surveillance state that very likely has a bearing on Dominion systems, on Smartmatic, and so forth. Assange can, at a stroke, demolish what remains of the whole Russiagate fraud. And remember, the Russiagate business was used starting around 2017, 2018, to claim that the Russians were going to interfere in our elections again, and therefore we had to bring in all the first steps toward mail-in ballots and all the other stuff that we're on steroids now. So this is long before.
After all of the complaining about Russians interfering in the elections, we had plenty of an election interference. It wasn't, unfortunately, the Russians.
Exactly. When you see something like the president, you put out the president's Twitter is shut down by Google. You don't need any Russians. You don't need Iranians. You don't need Chinese. You don't need Venezuelans. You don't need Canadians. You got this right in front of you. Yep. So these are potent things that could be done. The other flank that I think would be really fun is to hit very hard at the chairman of Smartmatic. Now, there's a lot of confusion about Smartmatic, Dominion. What is this software? What's the hardware? But Smartmatic has had a role and continues to have a role as a software application used in these other systems. The chairman of Smartmatic is a lord in the British House of Lords named Lord Mark Malloch Brown. Now, Lord Mark Malloch Brown, people often say that he's run by Soros. It may be the other way around. This guy is of a more senior level even than Soros in terms of the core of the British imperial apparatus. He has been on the Privy Council. He's not a lord for nothing. He runs with Soros something called the International Crisis Group, which has put out all kinds of scenarios for color revolutions in other parts of the world, and just put out a recipe for a color revolution in the United States right now. This is a guy who worked with a very significant political consultancy. I think it's called Sawyer Miller, spin doctors and so forth, working in the 80s and 90s, and then went over to the World Bank. And he's now the vice chairman of the World Economic Forum, which is Davos, which is the Great Reset. So when you look at someone like Lord Mark Malloch Brown being chairman of a firm that has its fingers in the U.S. elections and has this pedigree, you can pull on a string like that and destabilize things that then can allow more progress in terms of the trench warfare that you're in on otherwise. The other point I wanted to make, and I think it's just so fundamental, is that we really have heroes emerging in this fight right now. And as you said correctly, you can't come in a day after an election, you're defrauded, or 5 days after, you're defrauded. But when you have to figure this out, and you have some leads, but when you're dealing with courts, you're dealing with all the political, look at what happened in Pennsylvania, where a law firm that was originally contracted to fight the vote fraud got doxxed and backed out. You had the lady at the GSA who said, okay, I'll be even-handed. I'm not saying that either Trump or Biden will be the next president, but I will open up certain transition facilities for Biden. She said, I haven't gotten any pressure from Trump to have withheld this for a couple of weeks, but I sure got ugly, ugly threats from the Biden crowd.
Right.
So we know just, that this is a very intimidating environment. So to pull together these cases, to get testimony, takes some time. Now, I was up at the hearings in Gettysburg a week ago,
right,
on the 25th. This was a historic event. I addressed the event outside. There were about 300, 400 people. Anybody could get to the microphone. I went through some things on this British system versus the American system, and why Gettysburg is such, what Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address is what we have to, have in our minds. But the people who opened very, very remarkable state senator, Doug Mastriano.
I love Doug Mastriano. He's a great.
You know him. He's the background.
And even the president has started to, pay attention to what Doug's been doing over there. So
yes, it's just remarkable, and he has a background similar to Colonel Richard Black's that I mentioned before. In the military, a real straight shooter. Black was wounded a number of times in Vietnam. A lot of combat involvement, but he. These guys, Black, when he addressed one of our event this last Saturday, this International Investigative Commission reviewed the evidence he put forward in September on the fact that one of the backup plans from the coup apparatus was in a kind of impasse after the election, should that occur, that they would move in some kind of military coup. He went through additional things he said basically our alarm about that forced Miley and others in the military to be much more straightforward about saying that's intolerable and not allowed. But similarly, Doug Mastriano has a background very distinguished in terms of his military career as a colonel, a lot of military history. But what he did is he really seized this issue of that Gettysburg Address. That's what he led with in his hearings. It was 3 or 4 hours. Giuliani obviously spoke. The president addressed it by phone. But the people who then gave the testimony were people who were just your precinct captains, your poll watchers, your people who were, in one way or another, have legally designated responsibilities that were shut down on them. Now, for them to be able to come forward and do what they did in these hearings, one of them in particular that I had met there, named Leah Hoops, came and spoke to our group on Saturday, our international forum, and it was very moving what she said. Another one of the state senators who's working closely with Mastriano, Mario Crivella from the eastern area in eastern Pennsylvania, he spoke at our event. And what they are seat-of-the-pants patriots who have just sort of declared they're going to put this forward. And obviously what they did within 2 days of the Wednesday hearing, and this is when Mastriano had come down with COVID, so he certainly couldn't have been feeling too great. Right. By Friday, they had put together a tremendous resolution, whereas, 40 whereases in terms of the evidence and what should be the remedies. They threw it in late on Friday because that was the first opportunity they had. Monday, this year's session of the legislature ended, but you can reconvene. Right. Whether they can get that is a long shot, but the fact is they didn't wait for a procedural green light. Right. They knew that you have to put that evidence out there, mobilize people around it, get more and more people aware of it.
Oh, hi, Tim. Go ahead. No, I got to pop out a second. Go ahead. Keep going. Keep going.
Get more and more people aware of the weight of this evidence, and it inspired what then happened the next day in Arizona. It inspired what happened in Michigan the last 2 days. I think it's tomorrow. There's a hearing of some kind down in Georgia, Nevada. So the point on this is that you keep an accumulation of these things, and at a certain point, you've done your due diligence. Then if you can shift these more what you call the higher level issues around the coup apparatus, then you can get some breakthroughs on this. Minimally, what you do is you create conditions in which courts are going to be less subject to the essentially the rampage of the coup forces. The courts are not going to just look at things on the merits. Courts, to the extent they're going to be involved, are going to be weighing essentially who's mobilizing faster and expanding faster in the fight. So we have to be, we should be really fortified by the quality of these citizen patriots who are speaking up and creating the evidentiary dossiers that are now interacting and becoming a tremendous body of material. It can also prompt legislatures, even as late as when legislatures reconvene, either in special sessions or the beginning of next year. Legislatures typically start their next sessions the first week after New Year's. That is not too late to have legislatures act in terms of disavowing electors or creating other remedies.
So repeat that time frame again. I want you to just repeat what you just said, because if people are panicking, so much panicking, what you're saying is up into January, even the first week of January, we are still looking at legal remedies, legislative remedies coming out in this election process. Is that correct?
Right. In other words, what you don't know what can break. And it's one of those situations where there's no recipe. This is one of where we're in uncharted territory.
We've never done this before.
We've never done this before. It shows the wisdom of our Constitution that we have an electoral college, because it creates a certain deliberative process after the day of voting, or the time when votes are collected, in which you can have a political process be involved.
Right.
Now, I'm not giving any facile statement that after the Electoral College convenes on, I believe it's the 14th, and I think around that time they're supposedly opening up or doing the actual counting of the electoral vote.
Right.
But we don't know whether things can be rescinded. We don't know what further scandals can erupt. We don't know, for instance, there'll be a huge rally in DC on the 12th. Right. There are going to be a lot of people in other parts of the country on the move, on the streets. I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that we have to go outward with the evidence of the vote fraud, but also the motive for the vote fraud. Right. Which is the desperation to complete, and this is the other area that I know you and I had discussed, Suzzanne, and I'll go into it a little bit more, what it would mean to have a global central bank dictatorship.
Right.
We've obviously had much too much of this globalization. We have 6 banks on Wall Street who have 70% of all the deposits in the country. The mom and pop banks are collapsing. Mom and pop activity everywhere is starved. I mean, what a joke that the Democrats are raising an outcry about Mnuchin, who's no good. But Mnuchin, under Trump's orders, said, "Look, we handed the Federal Reserve all, $455 billion to backstop efforts to get new credit lines into the real economy, and it all went into Wall Street, and the Wall Street banks were not lending at all."
Right.
They weren't lending at all. So here are the Democrats getting up and down and screaming and their hands waving about it, saying, this is, we are cutting off the ability to get loans out to the communities. And the money was sitting there, and the big banks on Wall Street refusing to use it.
Yes.
So
anyway, were the problem all along.
Yeah. So the point on it is that we've had many problems that have accumulated. The Federal Reserve was an unconstitutional operation from 1913 on. But the point is, right now, we're at a point where this great reset, as it's called, yes, which started with the World Economic Forum, the Davos crowd, as a name plate for a pre-existing policy around June last year. I want to have people just for a moment follow the following word picture, okay? 2 weeks ago, in the city of London, a big conference of 100 movers and shakers took place, and they called themselves grab my thing here. They called themselves the Green Horizon Finance Summit.
Okay.
City of London. Opened and keynoted by Prince Charles, his royal vegetable.
Right.
We had Mark Carney. I call him Mark Carnage, as you'll remember from previous times we've had a chance to talk, Suzzanne.
Yes.
Mark
Yes.
Carney
I recall. Yeah.
was head of the Bank of England until a year ago. He was head of a bank for about 6-7 years. He was a principal figure along with BlackRock, Larry Fink, at a big Jackson Hole central bank annual meeting. This was the one in August of 2019, where they said we need financial regime change. We need digital currencies. We need to put green finance on steroids.
Right.
And right after that, they had a very big UN-centered green finance shindig, etc. Carney was then moved. By the way, at that time, Sir Michael Bloomberg was the UN envoy for climate action.
Oh, of course.
Of course. And he and Carney swapped places. So Carney came over and is now the UN envoy for climate action and finance.
Right.
And Sir Michael, of course, is trying to be, the guy who's going to be steering along with what's his name from Massachusetts, Kerry, the whole plunge by the Biden crew into this Green New Deal stuff. Now, this conference in the city of London had the head of the IMF, Georgieva, there, had Christine Lagarde, head of the European Central Bank.
Right.
Powell wasn't there directly, but the next 2 days later, he was at a conference with Lagarde in which Powell, head of the Federal Reserve, thinking, "Oh, great, we've managed to sneak Biden in there. I can come out of the closet."
Right.
So what Powell did is he said, "I am now having the Federal Reserve join something that's called Network for Greening the Financial System."
Mm.
And to join that network, you have to be a signatory to the Paris Climate Accord. So this was all sort of, pre-signaling what they're, should Biden actually get in, this is what, this is what he'd be doing. Now, people should really have the hair rise on the back of their head when they hear about digital currencies being issued by central banks, basically trashing the dollar. You don't have sovereign currency when you have a central
we
bank.
certainly have grave concerns. It's bad enough when they can print the money, when they can just create it out of pixels. We have even more concern. It seems even more concerning.
Exactly, because even so, you can still have a Congress direct whatever you've just pulled out of thin air into useful purposes. It hasn't been doing that, but it could. I mean, that's what the American system is. You put Glass-Steagall back into place to have a firewall between Wall Street and the commercial banks, real commercial banks, and then you lend to industry, and you lend to infrastructure, and you lend to the space program, and you lend to developing nuclear fusion and so forth. But the question of creating credit and directing credit is probably the single core economic feature of sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not directing your currency and your credit, you're a captive country. So we've been in this kind of in-between status for many decades. But these guys are going for the whole kahuna here.
Yeah.
So their idea is to have this currency be plunked into people's, basically you'd have access to it on your computer, and you could be assigned, just like they did with the COVID CARES money, everybody getting $1,200 and things like that. Here it would come from central bank digital currency. They would monitor how you spend it. They would enforce that you spend it right away. They think that they can do this to sort of goose up a little bit of purchase, but they also want to basically hook people psychologically to saying, well, this is a pittance, and I don't like the way they're controlling it, but it's the only thing I got.
Right.
So it's a stop to try to keep a certain number of people from really thinking through what the alternative should be in terms of restoring our sovereignty.
Sure.
But it gets much worse than that, because when they talk about these green finance initiatives, they're putting in a draconian police state finance arrangement where companies are going to be rated on what they call climate risk, You have to pay a premium if you're borrowing to keep your your factory going if it quote unquote has a carbon footprint that they deem unacceptable.
Right.
They want carbon taxes. You and I were at the CPAC this last end of February, Suzzanne. I remember I talked on your show there at your booth, and I was appalled that not appalled, but I was really struck that a very ugly operation was put in place to try to con some of the Trump base into going with the carbon tax idea.
Sure.
On the idea that the propaganda about global warming is so overwhelming, even though it's you could argue it this or that, but just throw in the towel on that, but just put in something that decarbonizes in a way that doesn't have big government agencies doing it. Some kind of tax structure does it in a way that sort of is isn't big government. It's absurd. But the two people behind this should have people really the antennas stirring. The first guy is George Shultz. Second guy is James Baker. Now, these are core establishment figures, nominally Republican, who Mr. LaRouche, Lyndon LaRouche, years ago named very accurately as synarchist. And I don't know if you've heard that term. Have you?
No, I haven't.
Synarchism refers to banker elements at the top who manipulate dominantly left and right-wing elements into various kinds of anarchy and upheaval.
Okay.
And what they do is they then try to say, look, we need technocratic government. We can't entrust the people to make any decisions here. The thing is too chaotic. So we're going, and this is what happened in Germany, because behind the seizure of power by Adolf Hitler was his finance minister, a guy named Hjalmar Schacht. Now, Hjalmar Schacht was a protege of the head of the Bank of England at that time, Montague Norman. Montague Norman's bank, which is Brown Brothers, was joined with the Averill Harriman Group, who was working with Prescott Bush in the United States. I'm giving you an idea here of how synarchism works. You've got bankers in each country all working much more closely together than anything involving institutions or any representative form of government in those countries. And Prescott Bush had set up a vehicle to get money to Fritz Thyssen, who was one of the key funders of Hitler. It was called the Union Bank, and it was shut down during World War II for trading with the enemy. Prescott Bush was the responsible, had the signature on the papers of incorporation. So you're seeing something here. Schultz, James Baker, we call him James Baker the Third, not James Baker the Third. Is like a consigliere in the old Venetian mode. The guy behind, who constantly is at the shoulder of the elbow of the mere elected people, but really working on behalf of these globally operating conglomerates, whether it's banks, whether it's big raw materials cartels, whether it's now the huge information cartels. These are the consiglieri. So that they're the guys backing this so-called carbon tax deal should really give people the picture they need. So we need to really have people be talking about this. This is something that's coming in sort of really off the radar screens of 95% or 99% of people. But this is what's really moving right now. And I think that people have to get an idea that, and this is where your advice, Suzzanne, I can't endorse it too much. People have to recognize we're going to be fighting this whether we succeed in reinstalling Trump or getting his reelection honored or not. We're in a fight now where people who through all the propaganda or for whatever other reason decided they weren't going to vote for Trump and did vote for Biden. A tremendous number of them are already recognizing, what have I bought into here? What, it's like, buyer's remorse, or much worse than that, because suddenly they, you look at these people that are coming out being named as the prospective cabinet and sub cabinet and so forth. It's all Obama retreads. It's all the crowd that, along with the Bush crowd, kept these perpetual wars going.
Sure.
The crowd that is all ready to get us into pushing NATO even closer up against Russia, putting NATO into the Pacific, all kinds of utopian military fantasies that somehow you can win a nuclear war. These are dangerous types, and President Trump was almost a party of one fighting that, because he had so many people around him who didn't agree, let alone the Democrats. But he put very good people into the Pentagon. That's kind of a down payment for how we can swing this thing in the right direction. Right. And I think we've just got to recognize that the more people grasp that the fundamental character of our nation as a constitutional republic is under threat, obviously through the vote fraud problem, but that's only a sort of projection or reflection of what's been going on since 9/11 with a surveillance state, what's going on with these global banking syndicates and their cohorts trying to get a currency in. So people really have to have a sense of where the question of sovereignty as defined by the Constitution politically and by Alexander Hamilton's reports to Congress economically have to become day-to-day subject of discussion. And we're bring people in. We're going to, we're not dealing with a core of people who are all, true blue Trumpers. We're dealing with a fight for the republic where the number of Democrats have shown nervousness. That, there are still some people out there who have some idea of civil liberties. They don't like the censorship. Look, very interesting is that Tulsi Gabbard has joined with Ron Paul on calling for pardoning Snowden.
Sure.
And that, the Tulsi phenomenon is very interesting because she backed the president on pulling out of Syria and Afghanistan and so forth. And she's someone who has saw tours of duty over there. So she's not anybody who's just sort of from the sidelines taking some pot shots.
Certainly, and she's had some popularity, and certainly some have been given some cred for her statements and her, her support of the president on that, despite many of her colleagues in the party giving her a lot of grief about it.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to just see that element grow and grow because, it's one of those things where be careful what you wish for. For anybody who was driven just by all the crazy stuff, relentless disparaging attacks on Trump into saying, okay, I've had it. When they look at what they bought into here, we're going to be seeing a very rich way to extend. We already 73 million votes for the president. That's not some kind of small residual force. But let's expand that by another 10 or 20 million of people who really care about whether they've got a job, whether they can get their kids off of addiction to the social media or to opioids or something. Right. People who there's the grounds for being able to dig in on on getting people to recognize just what's at stake is going to increase the ability to back up whatever other steps the president may take, whether it's even now, it would be very good to cashier Haspel. She was the London CIA chief for the 3 years when the British cooked up Russiagate.
Right.
In on the ground floor. And Christopher Wray has been an absolute disgrace, as everybody knows. So getting these documents out that the president certainly knows he's declassified them, but these institutions are sitting on them and creating a ruckus about that, which he's very good at. So let's create some real ruckus on things and see if we can get something out of Snowden, something out of Assange, really hit at the monstrous nature of not just what happened a month ago, but what's been happening 4.5 years, what's been happening since 9/11. We can hit this thing very hard. This surveillance state is not something that, this censorship and other things that they're doing right now is not something that most Americans feel comfortable with. And
I think folks are a little bit surprised to find out where some of the connections to these Dominion voting machines, some of the governors who were willing to cooperate with those contracts, who brought those contracts in. There's a lot of frustration. For example, Brian Kemp in Georgia, his not only his actions in regards to certifying the vote or not using his executive powers to audit the vote, but also questions about his involvement in bringing the Dominion system into his state, and other governors as well. So I think people are going to be a little surprised when we start to pick apart who exactly is involved in this international attempt to overthrow the U.S. election.
Yeah. And again, Lord Malik Brown is someone who really gets at a senior level, because when you have someone who's almost a controller of Soros, who was appointed as the British liaison to Obama when Obama came in, I mean, you've really got some hardcore stuff here. But on the Dominion thing, it's interesting that Texas, as people know, refused to take those machines after getting them duly tested. 5 or 6 other countries around the world refused to use them. So there was, anybody doing due diligence could have figured this out, even if they weren't actively trying to promote vote for it. They could have figured out that this was a open door to it.
Well, and I think our elected officials are going to have some real questions to answer when you see this equipment that clearly other states had severe questions about. Many exposés had been done about it even prior to incorporating the equipment, taking these contracts in. So, I feel like these states are going to have real questions to answer when it comes to, just as you said, it wasn't easy. It's not hard to find out that there are problems with the system. Why did not that put up more red flags? Why were not more states like Texas refusing to use these unsecure systems?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Tim, give us on a. We're at about 52 minutes, so that was we're doing really good on time. Give folks to close out. Give folks. What can people physically do? That's one of the things I think people are frustrated about. If your name isn't Sidney Powell, sometimes it feels like there's not so much that can be done. What would you recommend folks physically do, whether it be through using social media to share information, whether it be engaging in political activities like we have the rallies coming up? Is there communications that they can get involved with, emails, phone calls? What can people do to feel like they're helping the process along when so much of this seems to be in the hands of the attorneys and of certainly the courts?
Well, let me get to that in a second. It occurred to me there's another flank that that we could look at right now for the immediate week, which is that way beyond the deaths of COVID around the world, which obviously are substantial, is the rate of famine in places like Africa. Correct. It's augmented by COVID, but it predates it. It's been very intense this year, in particular, locust plagues and so forth. 7 million people have died of hunger so far this year. Another 30 million, according to the head of the World Food Program, a very remarkable guy named David Beasley, appointed by Trump. He's the former governor of South Carolina. He's done an outstanding job as head of this program, and he has the president's ear. We could get airlift of food in. We could get other kinds of emergency things that would have our military logistics involved, much as you can have military logistics involved in getting vaccines out and things like that. Right. Demonstrating the ability of government to attend to calamity like famine that's affecting tens of millions of people mobilizes a spirit of a country, mobilizes the best people. And we shouldn't neglect that. We are not, with all the broken down conditions we've got in our own country, we represent something in terms of a quality of mankind that, has been diminished. But when you think of what the world looked at when they looked at the founding of our country, it looked at the Lincoln period, when they looked at the Roosevelt period, when they looked at John Kennedy and the space program. Right. That's the quality that you want to bring out. And that's a flank because it diminishes the ability to play the identity politics, the ability to say to Black communities, all the garbage that's been done to try to.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Tim, because it's one of the pieces of advice I've been giving people is, not everything is necessarily all wrapped up in the election, all wrapped up, we need to re-engage life. And much like what you're saying, this is a perfect time of the year to get involved with ways in which you are participating in your community. You're feeling activated and competent because you're doing real stuff. And so I think that's a great suggestion to get people out of the house, get people doing the things that we're best at in America, which is taking care of others and really showing that spirit of American can do and can help attitude. I think that's great
Absolutely.
advice.
Yeah. And then the other thing is just to keep out on the streets, in the rallies, get messages into support the president, get in touch with state legislators, not only in the states which are contested. We have a terrific guy active with the LaRouche movement for years, a rancher in South Dakota, Ron Wazorik. He's run for Congress a number of times as a LaRouche independent candidate. He's talking to state legislators there. He almost single-handedly got the state legislature of South Dakota to pass a resolution to restore Glass-Steagall about 6 years ago. And that started a whole bandwagon where we got a lot of that kind of state activity going. He's going back to those legislators right now and saying, look, get in touch with your legislative colleagues in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, because there are, we have vested powers in the Constitution which have been neglected but can be reasserted.
Right.
Talk to the legislators on that. And by the way, many, and this is something that's very interesting, state legislatures, since they do convene in the beginning of January typically, they have in December all kinds of listening sessions.
Right.
And they're just local library, your state legislature. What's on your mind? What should we be doing? Well, we have a lot that we could tell them they should be doing. Certainly. So people should look for these avenues. Look for these kinds of forums where they can get things out there. Keep cross-firing this powerful material that's been put forward in these hearings, the Pennsylvania case, the resolution. People should just go to Doug Mastriano's website and pull out the resolution, look at it. On LaRouchePAC.com, we have a 1 hour video of highlights of the 3 hours of the testimony. Our Saturday event, we have what Leah I'm forgetting her last name right now. And Senator Cravella put forward. Leah Hoop. Their testimony is in there, along with what Bill Binney did in terms of the background on this surveillance state, along with what Colonel Black was saying, along with a very remarkable election expert from Tennessee, happens to be a Democrat, who went through just how you can try to secure the voting machines, because there are residues that need to be looked at inside the physical apparatus of these voting machines. He knows his stuff. He's very casually, he said it toward the end of our hearing, with all our international panelists and so forth. He said, I'm a Democrat.
Right.
He said, I'm not here to either install Biden or to install Trump. I'm here to have elections that people can have confidence in.
Right.
So that's we have elements of that people can pull out and put into social media. You have these hearings, take things from the hearings. On our Schiller Institute website, we have the full hearings. Schiller, by the way, is spelled Schiller. If people want to look that up, Schiller Institute. And we have a link to about 5 sets of the court papers at the bottom. So keep this stuff cross-firing, go outward with it, look for avenues where the state legislature, you can reach them, just call them up, send emails to these people, just constantly raise the fact that the evidence is massive. You have to activate a legislative process as well as a judicial process.
Correct. That's good advice, Tim. That is good advice, and I think advice that we will all certainly be looking into over the next few days, because I know that now that the Thanksgiving holiday is over and the election is still going on, people certainly have concerns and they want to be able to do something. And I think there's certainly a value to coming out and showing a great show of force, like we're going to see here on the 12th. And it's going to be a lot of great patriots in town. I know folks want to have something maybe day-to-day practical they can also do other than pack up and march around in the streets. So you've given them some great points to think about. And certainly I think some things that folks haven't been really looking at, because we were looking at a lot of these legal issues, not a lot of folks necessarily realizing part of our role can be contacting our state legislatures, contacting our senators or representatives within the state, governors, etc., and really communicating what our desires are in regards to having this election properly investigated, calculated, and in fact, potentially negated if necessary, if we cannot get resolution and feel that our votes have been counted fairly. That is maybe a remedy that I think these state legislatures are going to look into, a different way to seat these electors than the standard way. So there's a lot of questions. We're in unprecedented territory, and we'll have to see how it unfolds. But as you said, and I think there's a lot of ways in which, people need to remain calm and I think focused. It's important to realize we're not off the playing field yet, and there's a lot of game still left. Not just in this election, but in this fight for restoring American integrity and American values.
And I would just throw in, just remind people that it'd be good to communicate to the White House and to other officials. Let's get some kind of framework, pardon or whatever it takes to have Assange and Snowden weigh in. They know things that very much, really, there's, let me put it this way. They can throw some body blows at the apparatus that is not just involved in the vote fraud, but in 4.5 years of a coup against the president and 19 years of a surveillance state. And let's get people get a real, an appetite for throwing some blows at the enemy that goes at the level of that hits at that whole span. And then we're going to find some things loosening up in terms of the immediate vote fraud fight.
I agree. Tim, thank you so much. That's our show for today, folks. I want to thank Tim for popping in and really giving us some great points of thought and some information that we should look into, and certainly some angles that we should be moving towards. And we're gonna keep working hard. As you can see, we're here busy nutcrackering. So the holiday season marches on, and certainly I think so does our movement. So keep up the good faith and keep up the good work, Tim. I appreciate you coming on the show and
Thank you very much, Suzzanne. And good evening to everyone.
Bye.